The aim of this first PowerPoint is to introduce you to the new AQA GCSE course. What I'm going to do is talk about what to expect, a little bit about the way you should approach each type of question to maximize your marks, and focus particularly on ways in which we can improve your 12-mark questions. The new GCSE has 2 papers. Each paper is separate and will be taken on a different day. Paper 1 is based on the study of 2 world faiths. Everyone does the beliefs and practices of Christianity, as this best reflects our cultural heritage. You also will take one other world faith: Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, or Hinduism. I mention Buddhism in this PowerPoint because we do Buddhism at our school, and therefore these PowerPoints are aimed at my students. However, the content in them is generic and works for anyone. Paper 2 is the themes paper, or ethical philosophical paper. There are 6 possible themes you might study, but you only have to revise 4, and these 4 will be dealt with in a separate PowerPoint later on. With regard to paper 1, you answer questions on both faiths. The first section will be on Christianity, or Catholic Christianity, and it will be divided into 2 parts. There's a beliefs section worth 24 marks and a practices section worth 24 marks. Once you've done that, you turn to the appropriate religion you studied as an alternative, and you repeat the same process. The paper 2 has a different format which focuses on the 4 themes, and therefore the majority of these this PowerPoint will focus on paper 1. There are 5 different types of questions in paper 1 and paper 2, and they all have the same basic format. Question A is worth 1 mark, 2 marks for question B, 4 marks for question C, 5 marks for question D, and 12 marks for question E, which is the mini essay. The mini essay will also have a SPAG mark. This is spelling, punctuation and grammar, and a total of 5 marks will be awarded by the examiner to assess this particular aspect of your paper. Most people at the age of 16 could expect to get 3 or 4 for SPAG. Some will get higher and some lower, and you can get advice for SPAG on a number of websites. One thing I will point out is that if you are someone who has dyslexia or a special learning need, you need to alert the exam board of this. There's no shame in doing that. In fact, it's actually beneficial because the exam board will bear that in mind when awarding you SPAG marks. Let's look first of all at the 1 mark question, the most straightforward. This is just a multiple choice question with an option of 4 choices of answer to a fairly straightforward question. And all you do is you choose the right answer, A, B, C or D, and enter it into the answer booklet. For instance, I've chosen one which is, which of the following is not a gospel? And you have a choice of A, Matthew, B, Luke, C, Genesis, and D, Mark. Most of you will hopefully know that Genesis is not a gospel. It is the first book of the Old Testament and contains some of the creation narratives, amongst other things. And so in the exam, you'd simply write C. 2 mark questions, or B questions, are also fairly straightforward, and they're easy to answer if you've done revision. All you need to do is write 2 sentences. Write the first sentence and then write the next one. If your writing's messy or you like things to be clear for the examiner, you could leave a line in between each sentence. It doesn't matter, but I do believe it's sensible to actually write both sentences on 2 separate lines. I've chosen a question here which is a Buddhist question on 2 of the 4 Noble Truths. And the answer I would suggest is that you simply write, first of all, 1 Noble Truth is, and then give an answer. And then underneath, another Noble Truth is, and then give an answer. You'll notice that I repeat the question in the answer, and that's something I think is important. It helps you to structure your answer and ensure you're actually answering the question and not waffling on. And that's something which I think is helpful. And certainly when I was an examiner, it was really nice to see that, because it made the answer clear and the mark easy to award. The 4-mark question is the C question. And again, this is easy to get top marks if you've done revision. You clearly can't get by without any revision. The question will ask for 2 responses to a question. For instance, give 2 ways that the teaching of the Buddha influences the daily life of Buddhists today. All you do is as follows. First of all, repeat the question, but use the word because in your answer. The reason for this is that 1 mark is awarded for a factual statement and 1 mark for a piece of supporting evidence to show you understand why it influences, for example, the life of Buddhists today. In red, you'll see 1 possible example. 1 way the teaching of the Buddha influences Buddhists today is through his teaching on enlightenment, because he teaches that everyone can be enlightened. Notice the fact I repeat the question at the start, and I would repeat the question again for the second part. The most important thing to remember in this is you must include a why, and the best way to do that is to include the word because. In order to get the 4 marks, you have to have fact, because, and each bit is awarded a separate mark. The 5-mark question is exactly the same as the 4-mark, but with 1 main difference. You must refer directly to a quote or reference in the Bible or Buddhist holy book or Jewish scriptures, Islamic scripture, unless it tells you to do otherwise. And so what I say to my students is that they should do exactly the same as they did for the C question, but what they need to do is they need to make sure at the end they have a single line which refers to a biblical passage or a quote. For instance, explain 2 ways in which shrines are important to Buddhists and refer to Buddhist teaching in your answer. Or you might see a question such as explain 2 Christian teachings about the person and importance of Jesus. Please refer to scripture or sacred writing in your answer. When I say you should refer to scripture or sacred writings, you don't necessarily have to quote from heart a passage. You could refer to a particular part of the Bible, such as Mark chapter 1 verse 6 or John chapter 3 verse 9, and that will be sufficient because the examiner will know that that's an appropriate choice of scripture. We now move to the most difficult question, the 12-mark mini essay question. The first thing to say about the mini essay is it is going to be the difference between a grade or two. How well you do in that essay will determine how well you do in the exam overall. So it's important to practice this part of the paper a lot. Certainly in class, but also outside of class too. All of them are 12-mark questions, and they ask you to do the same thing, which is respond to a hypothesis. Now, the hypothesis is simply a question. It's normally a question which demands an answer which could be different depending on who you are or what you believe. For example, abortion is always wrong, or if God existed there'd be no suffering in the world, or science shows there's no need for God. You can see with all of these are questions which have an element of debate in them, and that's the point. This mini essay is like a very short debate where you're going to show arguments for and against a position as well as your own before reaching your own conclusion. It's very important that you mention at least one religious point of view. This may be Christianity or Islam or whatever, but it needs to be explicitly religious. You must also contrast your position with that of another alternative point of view. Sometimes this could be another religious position. For example, with the abortion debate, you might compare Roman Catholic teaching with liberal Protestant teaching. At other times, you could choose a secular position, say a humanist, non-religious perspective, to compare it to the first. You should always use some evidence to justify your point of view. Remember the term because, or this doesn't work in my mind because. And in order to reach a justified conclusion at the end, your argument needs to be balanced, and you need to have in the conclusion a way of showing that you have attempted to answer the question, you've reached a position yourself, and that position is justified based on what you said. Finally, remember, there's no right or wrong answer. These questions are not definitive answer questions. People argue about them all the time. All the examiner wants is to see that your answer is okay, it's balanced, it's reasonable, and it is appropriate for someone who is in the final year of their GCSE. The structure of the answer is, to my mind, the most important part of how to do well. In paragraph 1, which should be short, and remember the whole essay should take you no more than 12 to 15 minutes to write. So this is not a long essay. You need to write a short introduction that does two things quickly. First of all, it states your aim. You need to know what the answer is on your point of view before you start to write. Some of the best essays as you get older will be essays that start with a conclusion and spend the essay showing why you think this conclusion is valid. And that could be true of this as well. Start by saying you intend to show the hypothesis is true or false. But also make it clear you intend to show alternative positions, and those positions will include a religious and secular position. In paragraph 2, I suggest you start with the position which is not yours. In other words, why do people disagree with you? So, for example, if you were looking at the abortion question and you were pro-abortion, you would start by arguing why people disagree with you and present a case which explains that. You might want to, and probably would want to in this case, include the religious angle too. Paragraph 3 would be a contrast. It doesn't necessarily have to be your position, but it would need to be something different. So in the abortion debate, it could be comparing it to a liberal Protestant position that accepts abortion with limitations, or perhaps a secular, non-religious position, a feminist position that accepts abortion as a woman's right. Paragraph 4 is a short paragraph where you simply state your own position and justify it based on your beliefs, whatever they may be. And in the final paragraph, you write a short conclusion. You must refer back to the question. If necessary, repeat the question and show that you have answered it. Show you have showed balance, show you've compared 2 points of view, and that you've mentioned religion in your answer, and that you've come to a conclusion which is justified. Remember, there isn't a wrong answer to this question or a right answer to this question. There's just an answer that works and gains you the most marks.